After looking over some of the comments that was made over last week's vlog, I decided to extend it a little bit because I hadn't made myself real clear. It's typical of me, regarding my employment of all of those ideas I put forth. So I'm going to extend this. But in thinking about the topic more deeply, I realized that this really gets to the heart of why I'm a street magician, and that is the freedom, the aspect of being able to call my own shots. I remember when I was in Dallas, when I met Cellini, one of the things that drove me to the street was I was so tired of doing gigs. I felt like a dancing monkey. An upscale version of a call man or whatever, a gigolo, prostitute. I just felt like a prostitute. I was doing upscale dinner parties and, you know, cocktail parties, and just, I hated it. I can't. First off, I don't fit in well with those social circles, and whereas I can be well behaved and fake some degree of sophistication, it's not something I feel natural in. And so when I encountered the street and started working the street on a regular basis, it was a breath of fresh air to me. All of a sudden I was captain of my own ship. I did shows when I wanted and for whom I wanted. And there's nothing like that. I think it's what differentiates street magicians and from other types of venues. Magicians working in the corporate world, magicians working cruise ships, they've always got a boss. Our only boss is our pocketbook and how far we want to push ourselves. And so it allows us a degree of freedom and independence that I don't think you can find in any other venue. So, with that in mind, firing crowds, or it just allows us, I think, more strength in our work, more power in our work. Last week's vlog, I should have qualified it by saying, you know, this is strictly the way that I handle this is unique to me, I guess, to some degree, although Jimmy has a similar thing where he talks about patriotism, a good pitch. And so even the concept of firing a crowd or purging people, I've done it since I started. I think the first year that I really count as the beginning of my street magic career was 1991 when I met Cellini. And I probably, back in those days, fired a third of my crowds, a third of my audiences. There were medical reasons behind it. I had really anger issues. Dealing with my temper was very difficult, and the older I got, the more difficult it became. But I still probably fire as many crowds as any other street magician out there. Now, that doesn't speak well of me. I don't say that as a, you know, a braggart. I should be able to turn those people around, like I state in my book. I do handle, if I know that I have a crowd, then I do handle adversity better than if I am in doubt of the entire audience. And I'm going to try something this week, if I run into it, if this is a problem, because last night I did one show and that was it. I started another show and then fired the crowd. But in thinking back about that episode, I realized that I can do, like there's the pre-hat pitch, before you do your hat pitch. You're constantly looking forward in the show, telling them what to expect. Well, I need to do a preemptive strike if I feel like the audience is too lethargic, they're not giving me any energy back, they're not in any way participating, then I need to stop and say, look, this is a live show, and it just happens to be an interactive show, depending, and I really need some energy from you guys, because otherwise this is too difficult to do, and I'm just going to stop. And at least that lets them know what the stakes are, whether. So when I ask them, are you ready for the next trick? Say yeah, then I should get an enthusiastic overture. If I don't, then I'm going to have to reassess again. And that's constantly what I do with an audience, is assess individual attitudes. If I'm getting kind of a negative attitude from a group of people, that's when I'll purge them. Sometimes, and there is a very passive approach to purging. And the DVD, Four of a Kind. I remember during the filming of that, one of the shows that I did, I'm not sure that it was the one that was that's actually on the DVD, but I had a group of teenage girls in the front of my audience, and they were about 2 o'clock, and I didn't want them there. I knew that they were going to walk, and I just wanted to make them walk sooner, so I pulled out the handkerchiefs and I did the sliding knots, because I know that teenagers don't have any patience for that trick. So it was a passive way of purging part of my audience just by knowing, but that type of thing comes from experience, and the more experience you have, that's why I say you need the street time. You need that time dealing with people and being able to size people up. I'm still constantly surprised. I'm never 100% correct, but I'm pretty good at estimating people's attention spans, interest level, and to some degree, the hat. And that's how I know when to institute these type of strategies, to employ them, is when my hats overall do not reflect what they should be. I know what I should be making off of each show, and if it's half of what I should be making, or maybe even less than that, it's time to pull out the brass knuckles and go for broke. And yes, that experience is cathartic in that it does give you some sense of satisfaction when you employ the strategies and they are successful, and that's the only reason to bother, really. Because if nothing else, I mean, even if you go overboard, I mean, there have been many times when I've not lost my temper, but overdone, my speech at the end until people would just feel browbeaten, and that's it's not necessarily a good thing to do. Like in the MSM number 9, I think I gave you about 4 or 5 different speeches in there that I give. I use different elements of those speeches. All of those ideas that you heard, I pick and choose from all of those things. It's done impromptu. It's not something that I plan on. It's not a canned speech that I have. It's just something that I do, and I'm constantly watching how it's being received and when I need to stop. So that sort of thing only comes, though, with street time. I mean, you've got to have that under your belt before you can start assessing things at least more accurately. So, and I want to answer, if I haven't already, I want to answer a couple of Daniel's questions, specifically regarding my book, because I plan on half of this episode starting to talk about the 36 strategies. I dropped the cups and balls in, I think it was 2002 or 2003, sometime in there, because I wanted to get rid of the table. And the reason why I dropped the cups and balls, I knew, number one, there's going to be a glut of cup and ball workers, because now there's everybody and their brother is starting to make cups, and so I knew there would be more of that. And Gazzo's tape was taking off. Everybody was more or less memorizing Gazzo's act and performing that. So I didn't want to be identified with that, but most importantly, the main reason was because I wanted to get rid of the table, and I haven't looked back, and I haven't regretted my decision once. It took me a year or two to adjust to not having a table, but once that crutch, maybe, in accoutrement, whatever, it was a barrier between me and the people. It was a barrier between me and who I wanted my character to be, and I didn't want that barrier there anymore. It was standing in between me and my audience, and I wanted to eliminate it. And I've been very, very happy that I have done so. I could not have done so without knowing all the magic that Cellini taught me, though. I can't. I can have a child come up and hold my hat so I can do the slidini knots, but otherwise I would just use the table. That's what I mean by standing in between me and the audience. Because I could use a table, then I did, instead of getting the audience more involved. And I knew that I needed to get rid of that. So over the years, I think it's a beautiful trick. I do think it's overdone on the street a bit, but it's a great trick. So I don't blame anyone for doing it. But as far as over the years, have audiences changed? That's a difficult one for me to say, because I've changed so much in my performance. I said, if I had a sense to things, and talking with other performers that I've known over the years, the money has gone down. People are becoming more inured to street performers. There's not as much money in it as there used to be. I mean, for some there is, but by and large, the money has gone down some. And I don't know if it's because people are more used to street performers, or but the reception isn't quite as good or as restricted as it used to be. There's a lot more, I don't know, cynicism maybe in general in the street. That might be going too far, but okay, I hope those are some coherent. I can't go back and check what I recorded, because again, I'm having trouble with my computer and it's not functioning properly. But I had planned on going into some show structure this time. It doesn't look like I'm going to have time for it, but I will kind of tease it in regards to whether you're making a show out for the first time, you're trying to blueprint a show, diagram it and choreograph it. It's an essential element that I think you constantly need to keep in mind, and even seasoned performers who there's one thing that I'm going to talk about more than probably anything else next week in show structure, and I think everybody can benefit from it, whether you've been, you spent years out on the street or not. And if you're successful, you probably already incorporate this to some degree. So that will be next week, I trust. Thanks for the comments, the likes, and the subscriptions. If you want to include a comment below guessing as to what next week's topic or content will be, feel free, and I'll answer everyone truthfully. Thanks for your input, thanks for your involvement, thanks for your interest, and we'll see you next week. Ciao, ciao.